and that has an effect in terms of technology development. Connectivity is one of the things that you can easily compare, because that's one of the areas in terms of technology that we have tried to develop for years. But you have countries like Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Uruguay.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series brought to you by AKFI Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry association committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. My name is Isabella. I am the co-host of this talk series, here with Manuel, another co-host, and also the executive director at AKFI. And today, let's welcome our special guest, Geusseppe. Thank you so much for taking the time here.
No, thank you for inviting.
And good to have you. And thanks to this talk series, we get to connect with great minds to together discuss the current state and the future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. About our guest speaker today, he holds the position of head of the Latin America at Assess Partnership, bringing with him a wealth of experience in the field, and his career includes high-level positions such as Deputy Director for the Communication Industry of the ICT Ministry in Colombia, Advisor to the National Spectrum Agency, and the Communication Regulator. And currently, he leads technology policy in Latin America, assists governments, organizations, and multilateral organizations in addressing pressing issues related to connectivity and digital transformation. Excited to hear about your work today, and feel free to share anything. It's going to be exciting for the audience to get to have a sneak peek of what's going on in those areas. And to start our conversation, could you please introduce to our audience about the Assess Partnership and its activities and initiatives in Latin America?
Yeah, thank you, Isabella and Manuel, for the invitation again. Access Partnership is a policy firm. We are a consultancy firm originally from the UK. Our headquarters are in London, but we have offices pretty much every continent, in Singapore, in Dubai, in Washington. And so basically what we do is we make technology and innovation work for everyone. We try to enable the fair use of technology. We don't want to leave anyone behind. And my role as part of the organization is to lead our efforts in Latin America, which is a very interesting region for us in terms of everything that Latin America comprises, in terms of technology development and the pressing needs that we have in the region. So basically, that's what we do, and that's something that I will be happy to share with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe. And, Latin America is not a country, it's a continent, or more than a continent. It's actually part of North America and the whole of South America. So a little bit more about, how this, how Access Partnership can help with different countries and different parts of the region. It's a big mosaic of countries.
Yeah, indeed it is, and I think that's one of the areas that I enjoy the most about my work, and is the fact that we have to follow technology and innovation, and that usually is not coming from Latin America. Usually are other countries, the ones that are developing like the most innovative technologies, or Latin American countries, usually, not all the time, but usually are early adopters, or at least they want to adopt these technologies and make the most out of it. So following these kind of developments in terms of technology, but also bearing in mind the differences between countries. If you consider Latin America, just Brazil is like a different animal. It's like everything is different, the market, the language, of course, something of the culture. So that's something that is very unique in terms of the region, but also I think is one of the main assets, the differences, the distribution of opportunities and challenges. I think that's something that we try to take care of. And the way we do it is we have people pretty much across the region. We have I'm based in Bogota, Colombia. There are other colleagues that are also based here, but we also have people in Mexico, in Chile, Argentina, in the Caribbean. So, and internet makes everything easier nowadays. So following things now, it's, I think, easier than it was like, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. So I think that's how we do it.
That's great, and again, but it's not only the availability of the internet. You are part of the effort to build the infrastructure. We call it digital transformation, and I know from my experience it happens differently in different countries. You mentioned also in your introduction bringing the internet, bringing the services to everyone. And I'm sure there are regional and country disparities on how has been done. So, any insight on how digital transformation is going in LATAM, in Latin America, and
Yeah.
build a little bit the picture, because I'm sure it goes differently in different countries and different parts of the continent.
Yeah, Latin America is usually when I try to explain Latin America to some of my colleagues in other regions, I try to explain using examples, and I try to tell them, okay, here in one single city, you can find, or a single municipality in a country, you can find mountains, cities, rural areas, but also beaches, and you can be 20 minutes from the sea and having like a very warm weather, and half an hour from feeling like very, very cold weather. And that's Latin America, a blend of all kind of things, and that has an effect in terms of technology development. Connectivity is one of the things that you can easily compare, because that's one of the areas in terms of technology that we have tried to develop for years. But you have countries like Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Uruguay, with internet coverage like more than 90%, mostly in urban cities, in urban areas. Rural areas usually are left behind, and those are the leaders. And the connectivity in those countries should be understood and should be kind of addressed by acknowledging that they are the leaders. Then you have other countries that are trying to catch up, like Colombia, Argentina, Peru, this kind of country, Dominican Republic. These countries are not the leaders, probably are not leading in the same way. They don't have the same levels of coverage or connectivity as Brazil, for instance, but are trying to do their best. And then you have the other countries, those that are still trying to keep up with the pace, that still have lots of even urban areas without coverage, or with coverage with enough quality so that most people can benefit from the internet. So that's Latin America. And you can and you can think of Bogota, the capital city of Colombia. Half of the city is urban, the other half is rural, and the urban side of Bogota is fully connected, and you have 5G, 4G, even 3G, fiber optics, all kind of things. But if you move 5 kilometers away from city center and you go in a bit deeper into the rural area, there's no coverage in pretty much any of these technologies, and it's the same city. So that's the reality in Latin America. Very well connected areas with good levels of development, and other areas that are kind of a bit behind in terms of development.
That's a very complex picture, definitely, and as you said, it's every country has a small picture of the continent, the way I can imagine, right? You have all these variables, and you start with this coverage in digital transformation. However, when you think in terms of coverage, this is the basics, right? When we talk about digital transformation in the context of, let's say, environmental, social, and governance, ESG, sustainability, yes, we have to start with the people, and without connectivity, nothing else can be done. But in the areas of connectivities, also, what other social activities you see happening? How is the society moving toward a digitized society? For instance, government services, large company
Yeah,
services.
yeah, I agree, and that's and what you have just mentioned is, I think, it should be one of the main policy areas for all policymakers in Latin America to guarantee that all citizens at least have access to connectivity, because it's not the same as it was like 15 years ago, when it was perceived as something just for the rich people, or as a luxurious item. Now it's as basic as electricity, as water, and there are very difficult conversations happening in Latin America, because internet and connectivity enables people to do other kind of stuff, to access government services, to access health, education, financial services, or even justice. So that's a conversation that is kind of still developing in Latin America. Some countries are fully aware of it. Some other countries are still trying to understand how to kind of adapt their policy making to change this perception of internet as a luxury, or something that, oh, that's only for the people that actually want to have internet. No, people should all have internet by default, because that's the way that you can, that's something that you can use to promote development across society, across the region. And then once you have kind of this conversation settled, you can think, oh, now we can promote digital transformation, digital inclusion. We can have these kind of subsequent conversations, because if you don't guarantee the basics, it's very difficult to go to any remote area or rural areas and to start speaking and engaging with the citizens, with the people, and say, oh, you should use internet for productivity, and where people will say, what are we talking about? I don't understand it. Oh yeah, but this is good. So it's something that has to make sense for the user, not just for the industry. So I think that's the conversation that Latin America is trying to solve as we speak.
It's actually, and you're raising a very interesting point. We're talking mostly, we're starting to talk about public internet for the people, for the society. But of course, the internet is also has a strong industrial aspect. And when you think in terms of industrial internet, you have to think in terms of the profitability of the company, how it's impacted, how it's helped actually by the internet, and also how this company can perform in terms of sustainability. In other words, being collecting more data about the impact on the planet, acting on that data, reducing the amount of, for instance, of water, of carbon footprint, as you mentioned briefly. So, if you have any comments on the industrial internet, the internet use in the industry in the region, because I think this paints another picture that we'll be interested to hear about.
Yeah, my background is from engineering, and something very interesting that usually happens when we have this conversation is that when we mention internet for everyone, usually some stakeholders assume that it has to be the same internet for everyone, but that's not the reality, because if you use an example of electricity grid, it depends on the kind of use you have, or the kind of industry, or of the end user of the electricity. If you have a region where it's just manufacturing, and you need like 24/7 performance, you think of a different design for that network, in terms of transport, in terms of the filters, of the engineering, of the technical aspects of that specific use case. Is different if you think, oh, it's just a neighborhood, it's just like 20 households. It's different, and everything changes: the cost, the performance, the expectations. You can, and it makes sense financially, socially, but also technically. So with internet, I think it's pretty much the same, because in some regions, if you think Chile has tried to promote the use of connectivity for mining, and some regions in Chile benefited from increasing coverage thinking about promoting mining, and it's a different set and it's a different kind of design to what they have tried to do when promoting internet for households in Santiago, for instance. And that's something that it's very interesting, but I think that some policymakers and some stakeholders in the industry need to double check and to understand what's the best configuration, what's the best setup that can guarantee connectivity with and break out with this assumption it has to be the same for everyone. No, it doesn't have to be for everyone. It has to satisfy the basic needs for everyone, yes, but in terms of industrial use of internet, is different. Everything is different, and I think that's one of the areas that is kind of being more challenging for Latin American authorities now.
So, in your work with Access Partnership, do you get to talk to regulators and policy advisors? And I'm sure you met a lot of people in different countries. Do you see, I'm trying to link also you made a very good comparison with electricity, right? And the way electricity is moving on. Have you seen, for instance, examples where the electrical grid, the distribution of electricity, it's also helped by the digital transformation? And energy being a major source of, as we know, carbon footprint, of transformation also to renewable energy and so on.
Yeah, that's and I think that's I use that example on purpose, because when you speak of connectivity and internet, you first have to have electricity, otherwise you won't be able to turn on any kind of antennas or whatever. So it's important for people to because it's important. I think to use basic examples so that most people understand what we're talking about in terms of electricity and the energy grid. You can say that Latin America has made a massive progress in terms of increasing the coverage, and if you think of at least in the top 8, maybe 9 countries in Latin America, the grid coverage is more than 90% in terms of population, which is very, very good, because you can then assume that you can do other activities because you already have one of the technology enablers, which is electricity. In Colombia, for instance, is 96%. It's super, super high. And the areas where there's no like a grid in terms of the public or the state managed grid, there are alternatives. But in general, I think Latin America and because of the situation with water, countries like Colombia have I don't remember the figures exactly, but more than 60-70% of all the energy that is used in Colombia comes from renewable sources. So that's important because you increase coverage, you enable all the other socioeconomic activities that come after having electricity, but also you are trying to be sustainable in terms of, okay, I'm not sacrificing the environment just because I'm enabling electricity. You try to keep some sort of control of the trade-offs when you start increasing this kind of coverage. And that's the case in most countries. If you think Peru, it's very similar. Mexico is super, super similar. Maybe other countries like Brazil, because of the extension of the territory, is a bit different in terms of the coverage, because they are super, super big. But in general, Latin America, I think from the start, have been very responsible in terms of the sources for electricity generation and the use of renewable sources.
And I think you said it very clearly. This is the first building block for the latest economic developments, which if we think from digital transformation again, leads to building data centers, use AI, generate not only use AI in production or in manufacturing or in consumer applications, but also use the data centers to generate better and better products. And I know from my past experience that Colombia is actually one of the leaders in software development in the region. And I think with the electrical infrastructure you described, can become also leader in AI in Latin America. So I think there are good news in what you mentioned. And switching a little bit to regulations and I guess your other 100% of your job, right? There are many 100% in one's job. What's happening in the regulatory, and especially what regulations are coming up or have been enacted already in terms of digital transformation and sustainability? As I mentioned, AKFI is at this crossroad between the digital transformation and sustainability. So very interesting to hear more about the LATAM.
Yeah. I think, of course, the AI hype is the first thing, agenda item for most policymakers. This year, later in August, September, there's a ministerial summit here in Colombia with, I don't know, 20 plus ministers to discuss what's going to happen in terms of AI regulation in Latin America. I think the first part of this year and the second half of last year, most people were trying to understand how to regulate AI, but Latin America benefited from not being the leaders in terms of not many countries. Peru had like one law and some kind of small regulation just to kind of promote AI, but in general, Latin America, because we didn't develop most of the technologies that are being used now, has to be like an spectator of what's happening with AI. So the advantage of that is that you can identify the risks, the benefits, and you can have a more informed position in terms of, the way that we should regulate digital transformation and artificial intelligence. It's better off if we consider this and that. And I think that's an opportunity now in Latin America, but something that and you're right, I usually speak with lots of policymakers and regulators and authorities in the region. I always try to share some kind of ideas in terms of, okay, AI might be like the most important technology today, but if you want to make the most out of AI, you have to think also of the building blocks, as you call it, and in terms of data transformation, making sure that you have data framework, that you have a user protection framework, that the user's data is being protected, that you have good levels of cybersecurity. In terms that, of course, AI is very difficult to understand for some people because it's not something tangible. You don't see the AI, you see the results of AI in whatever activity you're performing. But AI exists physically. You need software, you need hardware, you need a physical space that processes all these algorithms and all these calculations, and that consumes energy. And that energy has to come from somewhere. And in Latin America, everything has to make sense. So you think of cloud and all the data infrastructure. Where is it located? Is it increasing energy consumption? Is it increasing CO2 emissions? Who's going to pay for it? How's going to that be managed? Does it benefit the society? Does it make sense with our digital transformations initiatives? Then are we going to regulate AI? So everything is connected in the end. But regulations in Latin America shouldn't, and regulators shouldn't forget that if they want to make the most out of AI, they should also make the most out of all the other enabling technologies. If not, they will reach a point where they will see, we have the most sophisticated regulation for AI in Peru, just to give you an example, but we don't have enough regulation to promote data infrastructure. So then it's going to be more expensive for companies to use robust AI systems in Peru. Then it's not efficient. You have to consider the whole picture and enable the whole picture and understand what are the areas where regulation is actually needed, and then it will be like a very good opportunity for Latin America to develop across all the opportunities.